Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Ursula von der Leyen announces ReArm Europe plan to boost European defence capabilities as EU leaders have come to Brussels for an urgent meeting on Ukraine and Europe's security. Will the summit bring a breakthrough in defence spending among the bloc's countries? More on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Will Europe have a shared nuclear umbrella? Polish President and NATO Secretary General discuss higher defence spending. And France continues to provide Kiev with its intelligence despite America's halt in military help for Ukraine. Europe must win the arms race, says Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, as EU leaders and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelenskyy gather in Brussels to discuss defense spending and future help for the war-torn country in the wake of the American decision to halt military help for Kiev. Meanwhile, Russia has rejected French and Ukrainian ceasefire proposals. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins is following the events at the emergency summit. Good evening, Angela. So, have any major decisions been made yet?
Yes, so the breaking news here at the European Council building is those 27 EU heads of states have agreed to a new era for European rearmament. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced on Tuesday this new plan for Europe to properly defend itself. So for this matter to already be approved here today in Brussels represents, like a very significant speed of which this decision has been made. But the basics of this plan is a 150 billion euro investment package. Member states can apply for a loan as part of this to co-procure military capabilities. The aim there is that they can send some of these to the Ukrainian front line. So there's a double prong to shore up European security as well as bolstering Ukrainian defence. The most strident of these comments in support for the package came from the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, who told reporters this morning that this package should have happened at least 1 year ago. Here is what he had to say.
1 year ago, almost 1 year ago, when I said that we need, it was a very clear signal and pretty, strong message to our friends, to our allies and to our foes, that Europe needs a strong defense union. And I said also then that there's no time to lose. But we lost it. Now everything has changed. And this is, I think, the most important message for today. Really, everything has changed in Europe. And this is the first step of this readiness of Europe to start in this arms race. We have no other choice.
Yes, so the other high-level talks today will be centred around what other things can be sent to Ukraine. This can be in the form of security guarantees. There will be talks there, as well as a military initiative. This was first flagged by the EU top foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas. And while there has been rumours that it's been taken out of the draft conclusions, what we have heard from senior EU officials is that it is back in. We're talking about potentially 1.5 million rounds of ammunition. The aim there is to strengthen Ukraine in the skies and at the front lines so that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy can go to the negotiating table with Russia with some firepower. That Ukrainian leader was in Brussels today. But listen to these comments made by the EU High Representative Kaja Kallas this morning about why more physical support should be offered to Ukraine.
We just don't have time. And there, yesterday, apparently, is what we need. But that's why the initiative that I've proposed has also two elements. Either you come in with the weapons, ammunition that is needed, or with the funding to acquire the necessary weapons and ammunition elsewhere. So I think this is something that we need to do in a really fast track.
Yes, we've also heard that Slovakia has softened its stance. That country's leader, Robert Fico, previously threatened to use his veto vote to block any measures in support for Ukraine. But what we're hearing from our sources here in Brussels is that a concession has been made in the conclusions to take Slovakia's energy needs into account. That country has been affected by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy cutting off the supply of Russian gas through Soviet-era pipes in Ukraine. But our understanding is that the European Council will lobby the European Commission to include Slovakia in these talks as well as Ukraine. But that is if the draft conclusions for the Ukrainian part of today's meeting is supported. The other elephant in the room, of course, is Hungary. We know that that country's leader, Viktor Orban, has stressed that he doesn't want to support any measures that could put at risk the ongoing ceasefire negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. But many here are wondering whether there will be a repeat of the 2023 European Council summit where that leader simply stepped out of the room for a well-timed coffee break. So there could be unanimous support for that measure. But we're also hearing that potentially, if there isn't unanimity on this, the 25 EU member states that are in support of Ukraine may release their own statement once the proceedings today wrap up. If this is a coalition of the willing, we don't know. But this is all from Brussels. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
A lot happening today in Brussels. Thank you very much. That was Angela Skujins reporting from the Belgian capital. French President Emmanuel Macron has proposed to spread his country's nuclear umbrella over European allies. The proposal has been met with a mixed response from European capitals, as some of them believe the main deterrence factor in Europe should still lay within the presence of the US troops on NATO's eastern flank. Kazimierz Łysiak reports from Brussels.
Could France share its nuclear weapons with other European countries? This option is now seriously being considered by European leaders. It was one of the topics of discussions at the special summit on Ukraine here in Brussels on Thursday. This option was hinted at by the French President Emmanuel Macron during a televised speech on Wednesday night.
Answering the historic call of future German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, I decided to open a strategic debate on protecting our allies on the European continent through the nuclear deterrent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the French president.
Last month, Friedrich Merz, who more than likely is set to become the new German Chancellor, said that he would like to discuss nuclear sharing with France and the UK, the only two European countries other than Russia which have nuclear weapons. Friedrich Merz was present here at the summit on Thursday, but the outgoing German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, who was also here at the summit, said that the situation when it comes to nuclear weapons should remain unchanged.
There are very specific rules on this, and what is particularly important is what we have in terms of nuclear sharing, which is organized in Germany. I believe that this should not be abandoned. That is the common view of all central parties in Germany.
But the proposal is gaining traction among other European leaders. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, when asked about this issue, said that nuclear weapons could be a great deterrent to Russia.
We have to treat this proposal seriously, because it must be one of our priorities to coordinate all our capacities in Europe and to build, in fact, one well-coordinated military power. This is what can give us a clear advantage towards Russia. And of course, as always, details matter. But this readiness of France, this is something very promising.
Now, unsurprisingly, Russia has reacted negatively to the proposal of the French president, calling it a threat towards Russia. This is all despite the fact that it has been Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, who on numerous occasions made nuclear-related threats against the West. Will we see more European countries having nuclear weapons in their arsenal? The discussions are still ongoing. From Brussels, TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is meeting with European leaders to secure their backing for Kyiv. His political opponents at home meet with US representatives. Could this cause another rift in already strained US-Ukrainian relations? We're now joined by our Ukraine correspondent, Os Keteji in Kyiv. Good evening, Os. So what are the first reactions to the summit in Brussels and to media revelations concerning Ukrainian domestic affairs?
Oh, look, the Ukrainians are going to be pleased with listening to the direction the conversation is moving in Europe. Zelenskyy himself welcomed the call to rearm Europe by the European Commission. So this goes along with what Ukraine is hoping for. But really, you know, there is much more to be done, and these are just the basic steps of it. Zelenskyy also seemed to approve Macron's proposed limited truce on air and sea. We understand this is something of a non-starter for the Russians, but this is something that Kyiv is showing willingness to consider in order to try and bring some sort of cessation of hostilities going forward.
The Trump administration is increasing pressure on Ukraine using different methods. Secondly, it's their style to spread rumors, because with all my respect to Politico, it's just spreading the rumors. So in reality, we don't know what is happening. Thirdly, I'm a little bit tired on all this discussion about elections, because in reality it was coming from Vladimir Putin. I just want to remind everyone that on February 24, 2022, the main idea of Vladimir Putin was to replace Ukrainian leadership. That was his fundamental target, which he did not reach for 3 years of big war in Ukraine. So that's why it's a kind of disappointment that Trump administration, in fact, is repeating these messages when, in fact, Ukraine, despite political specter, has a consensus that I want to have elections, but it is impossible. Because elections is not just the word, it's a very complex democratic process, which is currently impossible in Ukraine when we have 1 million people in army, not less than 7 million internal displaced persons, not less than 5 million adults in Europe, by the way, in Poland in particular. So, and come on, we have daily attacks from Russia.
I couldn't say that communication with opposition or ruling party is something strange or new. And we do understand that for any politician in USA, in European country, in Great Britain, in Australia, in any side of our country around the world, they do need information from different camps. So I think that Politico slightly overestimates this meeting and overestimate this meeting as pressure. It's traditionally that different administrations have communication with different players. Thus, we feel the pressure from American side. Yes, after happening in time of meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump, it was very perfectly seen by our citizens and our politicians. But this meeting don't estimate as a pressure.
First of all, President Zelenskyy is not in power just for power. His aim right now to ensure the just and long-lasting peace for Ukraine, and that's, I hope, is the aim of all politicians in Ukraine, no matter they are in government or in the opposition. I think it's important for all of the allies, I mean, Ukraine, Europe, and beyond, to, sort of switch the attention to Russia and what Russia is doing and not doing, because obviously Putin doesn't want peace, or at least he doesn't show any signs of peace. You know, I always say that Ukraine wants peace and Russia wants peace of Ukraine, and the bigger the better.
So TVP World there spoke exclusively to 3 Ukrainian MPs, 1 in the government party and 2 in opposition, to see how they felt about the US pressure coming towards the Zelenskyy administration, and whether these contacts between the new US administration and opposition figures in Ukraine was causing any rift. as you can hear there from all of these MPs, no, it's not causing a rift and they are not interested in elections. This was mirrored by Petro Poroshenko, who put out a statement this afternoon saying our team has been and remains categorically against holding elections during the war. We have said and continue to say that elections can only take place after a ceasefire and the signing of a peace agreement with security guarantees. Again, with security guarantees being the key line there, the opposition and the government still singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to these negotiations in Europe, and more importantly, the negotiations coming in the United States next week.
That was Oskar Teji reporting from Kiev. Thank you very much, Ozen. Stay safe. Polish President Andrzej Duda has met with NATO Secretary General to talk about the pact's future and what steps it should take to rebuild its military potential during a joint press conference. Duda has once again called for NATO allies to spend 3% of GDP on defense purposes as soon as possible, dismissing ideas of reaching that threshold by 2030. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
At least 3% of GDP of alliance member countries, of course you can do more if you want, must be allocated to defense, and not from 2030, but immediately. We need to carry out the task of rebuilding our military potential. Europe is completely unprepared for the threat of war.
The transatlantic relationship and the transatlantic partnership remains the bedrock of our alliance. President Trump has made clear its commitment of the US and his commitment personally to NATO. And it has also made clear the expectation that we in Europe must do more in terms of defense spending.
This was the urgent reminder delivered during a joint press conference of NATO's chief Mark Rutte and Polish President Andrzej Duda. Their meeting comes amidst the emergency Ukraine summit in Brussels. And with the fallout of US-Ukraine relations, including the US's decision to cease military aid deliveries to Kiev, the summit's importance has reached new magnitudes.
This reorientation of the US, the introversion that we now see, the sort of America First policy is basically creating a new international system to which actors like the EU have to adapt and have to now become used to.
On the eve of the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron delivered an address to the nation, which experts say served as a
balancing act, where he said we'd like to work with the Americans, but they may not end up on the same side as we are.
Whilst at the same time signaling the new scope of European commitments towards lasting peace in Ukraine.
European boots on the ground, planes in the air, in and around Ukraine after a peace settlement.
Poland has been at the forefront of the efforts to boost European defense. Last week, as European and NATO allies gathered for a special Ukraine summit hosted by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London, the Polish Prime Minister reiterated the need for Europe to take greater ownership of its security.
Everyone is also convinced that Europe has to take on more responsibility for defense. It needs to start bearing the burdens associated with building a defense industry, increasing aid to Ukraine during the war, and boosting spending as part of NATO.
What are now ambitious declarations are bound to turn into action as Europe braces for new defense realities. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
The US decision to halt military aid for Ukraine and the EU scrambling to revive its military potential have led to European defense companies' stocks rising fast. As European leaders discuss more defense spending, the military industry is already counting future profits. Aaron Damon reports.
As Donald Trump campaigned for a return to power, he had one clear message.
This election should be about the issues facing our country and how to make America successful, safe, free, and great again.
And now that he's back in the White House, President Trump is steadfastly keeping his America First promise.
What you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
It means Europe is confronting a new reality as its longtime ally refuses to deliver security guarantees and freezes military aid for Ukraine. But that reality check has also delivered a bounce for European defence companies. with stocks hitting a record high earlier this week. The likes of Britain's BAE Systems, Germany's Rheinmetall and Italy's Leonardo all on the rise, even as America's own defence market falls. So could the president inadvertently be showing a red card to his own team?
Since the weekend, it has become clear, and the stock market has also realized that Europe is more on its own and has to defend itself accordingly, and that the US has taken a back seat as a reliable partner. In this respect, armaments and defense spending are forecast to be higher.
Those gains have since stabilised, but EU leaders are watching Trump's every move and talking up Europe's ability to defend itself.
We are in an era of rearmament, and Europe is ready to massively boost its defence spending.
We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead.
Europe as a whole is really able to win any financial, economic, military confrontation with Russia. We are simply stronger. We just had to start believing in it. And today it is probably happening.
And in Germany, Chancellor-in-waiting Friedrich Merz even wants to amend the country's constitution to allow for a massive injection of defence cash.
I want to say this very clearly. In view of the threats to our freedom and peace on our continent, the same must now apply to our defence.
Whatever it takes.
At the heart of the debate is action.
We have to do something or Ukraine will fall. And that will be a crime on our part. But not just Putin's part, but on our part of a civilized world.
A sober warning as pressure mounts on Europe's shoulders. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
And to learn more about rearming Europe and Poland, stay with us after this news service for Adam Jasser's On the Record with Polish State Assets Minister Jakub Jaworowski. Despite America's decision to stop providing Ukraine with intelligence data, Kyiv will not be blind to its enemy's moves. France has revealed it is sharing vital intelligence with Ukraine. John Todd has this report.
Rescue workers battle to save some of the dozens injured in this Wednesday night missile strike on a hotel in Kryvyi Rih in central Ukraine that claimed the lives of at least 4 people. It's feared that the US halted military aid and Wednesday's announcement to stop sharing American intelligence could reduce Kyiv's ability to withstand deadly air attacks.
Ukraine is quite capable of local intelligence gathering. Its ability to track things happening thousands of kilometers away in Russia, where these airplanes and missiles come from, is less.
France revealed on Thursday, though, that Paris is sharing its own intelligence with Kyiv.
Our intelligence is sovereign. It's taken longer to come up to speed in recent years, but the advantage is that we have done so with our own capabilities. So yes, we have intelligence resources that we use to help the Ukrainians.
Experts say France has powerful satellites that can provide detailed images of potential Russian threats. But because it has fewer orbiting spy machines, reports may not be as up-to-date as America's, meaning Kyiv may have fewer potential targets to attack. Analysts say for the moment that sophisticated US weapons such as HIMARS rocket launchers have not been impacted.
You have several levels of GPS, but so far it seems that the Americans haven't touched it. But if they would, meaning that they would degrade the GPS signal, so to make it simple, it will also mean that the weapons used, like HIMARS, would be less accurate.
The one area that France will find difficult to fill is in electronic warfare and human intelligence.
It seems that the Americans are able to capture phone calls, discussions between Russian military with EW capabilities, but it's also very probabilistic that they have moles inside the Russian army. It's not really clear, to be honest. We don't, of course, it's hard to tell, but according to the level of intelligence they are able to capture, it can't be any other way.
The pause in US intelligence heaps further pressure on Volodymyr Zelenskyy to cooperate with President Trump's push for peace talks with Russia. Whether French intel sharing will have an impact remains to be seen. John Todd for TVP World.
As more Russian strikes reach Ukrainian cities, EU leaders and President Volodymyr Zelenskyy discuss their next steps in Brussels. Could Europe fill the gap left by the American decision to halt military aid? And what is the near and distant future of Ukraine, especially in light of the recent rift in Kiev-Washington relations? And to talk about this and more, we're joined by former Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov. Good evening.
Good evening. Dobry wieczór.
So, first of all, how would you comment on the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's words that the war in Ukraine is in fact a proxy war between the US and Russia?
I would like to agree with Mr. Rubio because in December 2021, Kremlin sent a request or demands to the NATO countries and to the Washington, D.C. that they have to move their NATO forces to the line of 1997. And in January 2022, Kremlin got their answer, not. And after that, they started the full-scale invasion. So this war not against the Ukraine. This war was started by Russia against the civilized world, against the United States, also as well, like in NATO countries.
Mm-hmm. I see. You're aware of the fact that Russia is also of the same opinion. Just to quote Kremlin spokesperson Peskov, Rubio's position was absolutely in line with the position that our president and foreign minister have repeatedly expressed.
Yes, they also repeated that and trying to send the signal to their population, but that their plan to grab or capture Kyiv during 72 hours or 3 days was false. We fight back 3 years. That's why they're trying to explain to their population that the special military operation was false because they're fighting with the NATO countries.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you assess the immediate tactical and strategic implications of the American decision to halt the aid for Ukraine, particularly in the Eastern Front, as Ambassador Zaluzhny said today that the situation has reached a critical point?
You know that I'm always trying to keep my optimism. Starting from the February 2022, I'm trying to keep it this time also. Because this war, after 3 years, became the new type of war. This is a not conventional war like it was 3 years ago, or Second World War, or Second World War. It's a new type of war because we're fighting using simultaneously Soviet-era weaponry, NATO standard weaponry, and Ukrainian modern weaponry like electronic warfare. Different types of drones on the sea, on the soil, on the ground. And it's absolutely new era of the war in the world. So it means that if we will have lack of the armament, for example, for the artillery systems, we will use FPV drones much easier against the Russian tanks or infantry fighting vehicles. So I see on that not so dramatically, and I hope that is one of the phase of the negotiation.
Now, I'd like us to discuss further words of Ambassador Zaluzhny. Well, of course, Ukraine does not have its nuclear weapons yet, so it pays for its freedom with the blood of its people, but its armed forces are proving that in the near future, perhaps within 5 to 10 years, a new European security architecture will be impossible without Ukraine. Ukraine does not have its nuclear weapons yet. Now, is this the official position of Kiev?
Not. I didn't hear the official position about that, but I can tell you the real story, which I heard from the president of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma. He told me then he signed the Budapest memorandum in Budapest, and also he came to hotel for signing with the president of France, Monsieur Mitterrand. After the signing that France joined to this memorandum, oldest president of France told the youngest president of Ukraine, young men, they will cheat you. So this is the truth.
Mm. And lastly, also, from General Zelenskyy. Washington's refusal to fully acknowledge Russia's aggression is a new challenge, not only for Ukraine, but also for all of Europe. This shows that it is no longer just Russia and the so-called axis of evil attempting to dismantle the global order. The US is actually destroying it completely. Do you agree?
I would say that this war was started during the very popular cognitive bias that Ukraine will fall during the 3 days. And these rumors started from the Washington, D.C., from the media, according to some kind of report to the Congress of the United States. And this bias became very popular in all capitals. But this was not true, because Ukraine, I can repeat it again, we are fighting not 3 days, not 3 months, not 3 weeks, we are fighting back 3 years.
Former Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov was our guest tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do widzenia.
And thank you for watching. Adam Jasas on the Record is coming up next.